My name is Clara, and if you're reading this, it's probably because you've heard whispers of what happened, or maybe you've seen the headlines splashed across every major news outlet. Either way, let me start by saying that I never intended for any of this to happen. Not really. But when they replaced me with someone cheaper, something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly like a fuse burning out in the dark. I worked at Sterling and Company, one of those big corporate firms where people wear suits, so sharp they might cut you if you get too close. We were consultants, problem solvers, or at least that's what we called ourselves. The truth? Most days, we just made things look good on paper, while executives pocketed bonuses and employees scrambled to keep up. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough. And after years of clawing my way through promotions, late nights, and endless cups of coffee, I had finally earned my spot as a senior analyst. For 5 years, I poured everything into that job. My life revolved around spreadsheets, client meetings, and quarterly reports. I knew the ins and outs of our contracts better than anyone else in the department. Hell, I practically wrote half of them myself. And sure, it wasn't perfect. I hated how impersonal the company could be, how easily people got chewed up and spit out. But I told myself it was worth it. After all, I was climbing the ladder, right? Doing exactly what society said I should do. Work hard, stay loyal, reap the rewards. Then came the day everything changed. It started innocently enough. A meeting request from HR flagged as urgent. At first, I didn't think much of it. These kinds of meetings happen all the time. Someone needed clarification on benefits, or there was some minor paperwork issue. So I walked into the conference room expecting nothing more than a quick chat. Instead, I found 2 people waiting for me. Rachel, the head of human resources, and Michael, my direct supervisor. Their faces gave nothing away, but the stiffness in their posture set off alarm bells in my head. "Clara," Rachel began, her voice overly cheerful. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice. Please have a seat." I sat down, crossing my legs and folding my hands neatly in my lap like I always did during meetings. Professional, polished, ready to listen. But as soon as Rachel opened her mouth again, I felt the floor drop out beneath me. "We wanted to discuss your current role here at Sterling and Company," she said, exchanging a glance with Michael before continuing. "As you know, we're always looking for ways to optimize efficiency and reduce costs. With that in mind, leadership has decided to restructure certain positions within the company." Restructure. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. It was corporate speak for, "You're fired." And even though they hadn't said it outright yet, I already knew where this was going. Michael chimed in then, his tone apologetic but firm. "Clara, your contributions over the years have been invaluable. Truly, you've played a critical role in shaping this department. However, we've recently onboarded a new team member who brings fresh perspectives and, frankly, comes at a lower cost to the company." Lower cost. Just like that, my value boiled down to numbers on a spreadsheet. All those years of dedication, all the hours I'd sacrificed, they weren't enough anymore because someone younger, hungrier, and cheaper had come along. They didn't even bother sugarcoating it. They just laid it bare, like ripping off a bandage without caring whether it took skin with it. I nodded numbly, forcing a tight smile onto my face. "I see," I managed to say, though my throat felt dry and scratchy. "So, what happens now?" Rachel slid a folder across the table toward me. Inside were termination papers, severance details, and instructions for returning company property. She explained the process as if reciting from a script, her words blending together into a dull hum. I barely heard her. All I could focus on was the anger bubbling beneath the surface, threatening to spill over. When the meeting ended, I gathered my things and left the office without saying goodbye to anyone. I couldn't trust myself to speak without screaming or crying, or worse, both. Once home, I collapsed onto my couch, staring blankly at the ceiling as reality sank in. I'd been replaced, cast aside like an old piece of furniture no longer fit for use. And for what? To save a few $1,000s? That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Rachel's fake sympathy, Michael's calculated indifference. I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind, dissecting every word, searching for answers that weren't there. What had I done wrong? Had I missed some crucial sign that my position was in jeopardy? Or was it simply inevitable, the natural order of things in a world driven by profit margins? By morning, Exhaustion weighed heavily on me, but clarity began to take shape. If they thought they could dispose of me so callously, then fine. Let them deal with the consequences. Because, while they might have underestimated me, I knew something they didn't. Sterling and Company wasn't as squeaky clean as it pretended to be. Over the next few days, I threw myself into research. I combed through old emails, documents, and files I'd saved over the years. Things I'd tucked away thinking they might come in handy someday. And oh, how right I'd been. Buried deep within those archives were discrepancies, inconsistencies, and red flags that would make any auditor salivate. Contracts padded with unnecessary fees. Expenses reported twice under different names. Kickbacks disguised as consulting agreements. It was all there, hidden in plain sight for anyone willing to look closely enough. At first, I considered going straight to the media. Exposing Sterling and Company's dirty secrets would be satisfying, wouldn't it? Watching them squirm under public scrutiny, scrambling to explain themselves. It almost made me giddy just thinking about it. But then doubt crept in. Would anyone believe me? Without concrete evidence, I'd just be another disgruntled ex-employee airing grievances. No, I needed to play smarter than that, which is why I turned to the federal government instead. Filing a complaint with the Department of Labor seemed like the logical first step. After all, if anyone had the power to investigate corporate misconduct, it was them. I drafted a detailed report outlining everything I'd uncovered, attaching copies of incriminating documents wherever possible. Then, using an anonymous email account I created specifically for this purpose, I submitted the complaint and waited. Weeks passed without any sign of activity. At times, I wondered if my efforts had been wasted, if my report had landed in some dusty filing cabinet, forgotten alongside countless others. But then, one afternoon, I received an email notification. It was brief, formal, and devoid of specifics, but the message was clear. My complaint had triggered an audit. A federal audit. Those 3 words sent a thrill coursing through me. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Now, Sterling and Company would have no choice but to face the music. Every shady deal, every unethical practice, they'd all come tumbling down like a house of cards. But as satisfying as it felt to watch the gears turn, I couldn't shake the nagging sense that this was only the beginning. Sure, triggering an audit was a victory, but it wasn't personal, not yet. For that, I needed something bigger, bolder. Something that would ensure everyone involved paid the price for what they'd done to me. And so, I began planning my next move. The days following the audit announcement blurred together in a haze of strategy sessions and reconnaissance missions. I spent hours poring over financial records, piecing together connections between Sterling and Company and its shadowy network of shell companies. Each discovery fueled my determination, pushing me further down a path I couldn't turn back from. One name kept surfacing in my research: Victor Langston. He was the CEO of Sterling and Company, the man pulling the strings behind the scenes. Everything traced back to him, from the inflated contracts to the questionable hiring practices. If anyone deserved to fall, it was him. But taking down Victor wouldn't be easy. He was untouchable, or so he thought. His wealth insulated him from accountability, his influence shielding him from scrutiny. To bring him down, I'd need leverage. Something undeniable, something explosive. That's when I remembered the server room. Back when I still worked at Sterling and Company, I'd stumbled upon an unmarked door during a late-night project. Curiosity got the better of me, and I discovered a small server room tucked away in the basement. Rows of humming machines lined the walls, their blinking lights casting eerie shadows across the floor. Most employees didn't even know it existed, let alone what it contained. But I did. Because buried within those servers were backups, copies of every document, email, and transaction the company had ever processed. If I could access those files, I'd have everything I needed to expose Victor and his empire once and for all. Breaking into Sterling and Company wouldn't be easy, especially now that I was persona non grata. Security had tightened since my departure, and getting past the guards undetected seemed impossible. But impossibility had never stopped me before, and it wouldn't stop me now. Using contacts from my old network, I pieced together a plan. A former coworker agreed to smuggle me into the building under the guise of a routine maintenance visit. From there, I'd slip away, navigate to the server room, and retrieve the data I needed. Simple in theory, risky in execution. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The night of the operation arrived faster than I expected. Dressed in nondescript coveralls and armed with a fake ID badge, I followed my contact through the front doors of Sterling and Company. My heart pounded in my chest as we passed security checkpoints, each step bringing me closer to my goal. When we reached the designated area, I slipped away, melting into the shadows like a ghost. Finding the server room proved easier than anticipated. The door stood slightly ajar, its lock disabled courtesy of a favor called in from an old IT acquaintance. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the hum of machinery filling the silence. I moved quickly, connecting my laptop to the main terminal and initiating a data transfer. Minutes ticked by agonizingly slow, each second stretching into eternity. Just as the download completed, alarms blared throughout the building. Panic surged through me as red lights flashed overhead, signaling an intrusion alert. Somehow, they discovered my presence. I grabbed the drive, shoved it into my pocket, and bolted for the exit. Chaos erupted around me as I sprinted through the corridors, dodging security guards and ducking into empty offices to avoid detection. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, sharpening my senses and propelling me forward. Finally, I burst through a side door and into the cold night air, gasping for breath as I disappeared into the darkness. Now, sitting in my apartment with the stolen data spread out before me, I can't help but feel a mix of triumph and trepidation. This information is powerful, more powerful than anything I've ever handled. It holds the key to dismantling Sterling and Company and exposing Victor Langston for the fraud he truly is. But wielding that power comes with risks, ones I'm not entirely prepared for. Still, I press on, driven by a singular purpose: justice. Whatever happens next, I'll face it head-on, armed with the truth and a resolve that refuses to waver. The weight of what I'd done settled over me like a heavy blanket. For days, I barely left my apartment, alternating between staring at the files on my laptop and pacing the small living room. The data was overwhelming, thousands of documents detailing corruption, fraud, and greed. It wasn't just Sterling and Company. It was a web of interconnected companies, all feeding into Victor Langston's empire. Every transaction told a story of exploitation. Employees underpaid or replaced, clients misled, shareholders duped. And at the center of it all stood Victor, pulling strings like a puppet master. But having the evidence wasn't enough. I needed to decide how to use it. Handing everything over to the authorities seemed like the obvious choice, but part of me hesitated. Would they act quickly enough? Or would Victor's lawyers swoop in, burying the truth beneath layers of legal jargon and technicalities? No, if I wanted this to stick, I had to play smarter. I had to strike where it hurt most, his reputation. That's when I remembered something from my time at Sterling and Company, a little-known clause in their partnership agreements. If any partner engaged in unethical behavior, the other stakeholders could vote to dissolve the company entirely. It was buried deep in the fine print, a fail-safe no one ever expected to use. But now, armed with proof of Victor's misconduct, I saw an opportunity. I began reaching out to key players within Sterling and Company's network. Executives, board members, influential investors. All people who had something to lose if Victor's schemes came to light. Using burner phones and encrypted messaging apps, I fed them snippets of information, careful not to reveal too much too soon. My goal was simple: plant seeds of doubt, make them question whether aligning themselves with Victor was worth the risk. At first, responses were cautious. Some ignored my messages outright, dismissing them as baseless accusations. Others demanded proof before committing to anything. But as more details emerged, emails showing bribes, contracts riddled with kickbacks, even the most skeptical started to waver. One by one, they agreed to meet, each wanting assurances that their involvement wouldn't backfire. It was during these meetings that I truly understood the power dynamics at play. These weren't innocent bystanders caught up in Victor's schemes. They were complicit, profiting off his actions while pretending ignorance. Yet now, faced with the possibility of exposure, they scrambled to distance themselves. Their desperation gave me leverage, and I used it ruthlessly. By the time I arranged a clandestine gathering of the top stakeholders, I'd built a coalition strong enough to challenge Victor directly. We met in a private suite at a high-end hotel, far removed from prying eyes. Tension crackled in the air as everyone took their seats, glancing nervously at one another. I stood at the head of the table, laptop open in front of me, ready to lay out the case against Victor. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "I know why you're here, to protect yourselves, to ensure your names aren't dragged through the mud when this blows up. But let me make one thing clear. Staying silent won't save you. Not anymore." With that, I hit play on a video presentation I'd prepared. On screen, document after document appeared, each accompanied by commentary highlighting its significance. Emails revealed shady deals brokered in secret. Financial statements exposed money funneled into offshore accounts. Testimonies from former employees painted a damning picture of systemic abuse. By the end, the room was deathly quiet, the weight of what they'd seen sinking in. One man, a senior executive named Richard, spoke first. This changes everything," he said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "If even half of this is true, we're looking at criminal charges. Maybe worse." "It's all true," I replied, meeting his gaze. "And if you think ignoring it will make it go away, you're wrong. The feds are already involved. They'll find this eventually. The only question is whether you want to be seen as victims or accomplices." The room erupted into murmurs, panic rippling through the group. Some argued for immediate action, others urged caution, but the consensus was clear. Victor had to go. When the discussion turned to logistics, I outlined my plan. Using the partnership clause, we could call an emergency vote to remove him as CEO and initiate dissolution proceedings. With their combined influence, dismantling his control would be swift and decisive. There was, however, one catch. In order to secure their cooperation, I needed assurance that reforms would follow. New leadership, transparency measures, protections for employees, all non-negotiable terms. At first, resistance flared. Change meant risk, and these people thrived on stability. But I held firm, reminding them that public trust was the only way to salvage what remained of Sterling and Company. Reluctantly, they agreed. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. This wasn't justice in the traditional sense, not yet, but it was progress. For the first time since my termination, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Victor didn't see it coming. When the board convened for an emergency session 2 days later, he walked in confident, expecting routine business. Instead, he found himself surrounded by hostile faces, each holding copies of the incriminating documents I'd provided. The vote was swift and unanimous. Stripped of his title and authority, Victor stormed out of the room, vowing revenge. But without his network to shield him, his threats rang hollow. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story, dissecting every scandalous detail. Shareholders filed lawsuits, demanding accountability. Employees spoke out, sharing stories of mistreatment and betrayal. The federal audit intensified, uncovering even more wrongdoing than I'd anticipated. And through it all, I watched from the sidelines, anonymous but satisfied. Yet amidst the chaos, questions lingered. What next? Could I return to normal life, knowing what I knew? Or was this just the beginning of something bigger? One evening, as I scrolled through headlines chronicling Sterling and Company's downfall, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed across the screen. Hesitant, I answered. "Clara," a voice said, low and urgent. "We need to talk." I froze, heart pounding. How did they know my name? The voice on the other end was Richard, the senior executive from the hotel meeting. He didn't threaten or accuse, he thanked me. "You've done what none of us had the courage to do," he said. "If you're ever ready to come back, there's a place for you here. A real one." For the first time in months, I smiled. Not because I wanted to return to corporate life, but because I'd proven something to myself. Power isn't about titles or money, it's about choices. And I'd chosen to fight back. As I hung up, I deleted the burner phone and walked outside. The city buzzed around me, alive with possibilities. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't afraid anymore.